Okay, great.
Yay!
I think we're live. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you to Voto Latino for hosting this awesome conversation. My name is Natalie Montelongo. I'm the Executive Director of People First Future. It is an organization that was started by former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Julian Castro, to support and promote candidates up and down the ballot who are running bold and progressive agendas. I am so excited to be here today by two incredible actors, Andrew, who just was starting in Teen Wolf, MTV's Teen Wolf, and Carmela, who just started on Netflix's thriller You, that I am super obsessed with and binge watch. So welcome, you two. Thank you so much for using your voice and your platform for good. And I want to allow you the opportunity to introduce yourselves and tell us about, why you think it's so important to be so active and vocal right now.
Ladies first, or should I?
Thanks, Andrew. My name's Carmela, and I'm an actor. I live in LA with my family, and I just really think this is such an incredibly important moment for our country right now, and especially for the youth to be able to just take hold of this situation of this election that we have coming up. I am the daughter of immigrants, and I just really feel that it's my duty and my responsibility to learn as much as I can about our democratic process. And so I really look up to people like you, Natalie, who've just totally taken charge and taken the lead, especially for us Latinos. And I'm just really excited to be here with you today.
Thanks, Carmela.
And my name is Andrew Matarazzo. I'm an actor. I also have immigrant parents. I was born in Brazil, but raised mostly in the US. I've been here longer now than I have in Brazil. But why voting is important, I feel like every year we hear this consistent narrative that this year your vote counts more than ever. But to me, I feel like times have changed and the political landscape has changed, the climate has changed. So to me, I truly feel like this is an election that has a lot more weight than any in my lifetime, at least. And I think it's really interesting that when I read all of these when I see the margins of all these positions that were won, they are actually very small margins of people that win. And that makes me feel like all these people who are saying my vote doesn't count, it kind of, when you look at the numbers, if only those people stepped in, it really could have made a huge difference. So and one fact that I'm gonna read so I don't butcher it, but I was blown away when I read that since 2016, every year 1 million Latin youth turned 18. So this year we have 4 million more voters in just the Latin communities. So if all of those 4 million people thought my vote does count, that's 4 million more votes. So I feel like voting is just really important to step in and do your part.
Yeah, I think it's true. And in fact, Latinos are the second largest voting bloc in this election.
Right.
And now there's 32 million Latinos eligible to vote, which is, we do have a lot of power, and we just need to motivate people and educate people to go out to vote. But I think it's interesting that all three of us actually come from immigrant parents. I'm first gen. I grew up in Brownsville, Texas. And when people ask me like what motivated me to become more active, I can't help to think of my parents. And, I think of specifically one moment in my life. I grew up in Matamoros, Mexico, that's the border city of Brownsville. And when my dad finally got his residency, we were able to move to the US. We had been saving, bought our first house in the US. My dad's a doctor in Mexico. And so even though we moved, he still was crossing the border every single day to go to work. The Mexican peso crisis hit in the 90s, as soon as we bought our house. And so what that meant is that the dollar, the peso devaluated. And so my dad had to work twice as hard to make up for the value of the dollar. And I remember even in those moments, my dad had patients who were being affected by this crisis also, who would come in without healthcare, without having any money, but needed treatment. And he would say yes, even though we were struggling also, to everybody. And I remember he would come home with like chickens or like a goat in an ice chest, like really Mexican things that people would give him as gifts. But that really taught me a lot about compassion and about seeing people's humanity and seeing people as people. And I think I carried that with me, you know, and didn't realize that that's not how people usually operate.
Right.
And so when I started becoming more aware of injustices is when I started becoming more vocal. So I wanted to ask both of you, did you have a moment in your life when that happened? Or maybe it's just this election now and seeing all the injustices come up, because they've always existed, but now I feel like they're, you know, very clearly in everyone's faces. So I'd love to know what made you become more vocal, if there was a moment that created that. I'll start with Carmela.
Yeah, so, you know, your family sounds really amazing, and I think the work that you do truly honors your father and everything your family went through. And so I kind of have a similar situation where my parents were both born in Cuba, and their parents brought both of their families over in the 1960s to this country. And so I was brought up um, really with the idea to just be proud that this is where we are, and to honor all the sacrifices that my family made to leave Cuba so that we could live and grow up in a democratic nation where we can do things like protest, where we could do things like speak out against things that are not okay within our government or our political leaders, and be able to do that freely. And so to be able to honor that, I really feel like it's my duty. And I really feel like it's so important to be able to honor my grandparents and my parents and everything that they left behind, and to educate myself as much as I can about this process and vote, because where they came from, that's not something that happens in a democratic way. And so that's kind of where my heart lies within all of this as well.
For me, I think that I was one of those people that were always like, oh, I'm not into politics. I think as an artist, I'm very sensitive and empathetic, and a lot of times political stuff would overwhelm me, and I would feel like my mental health would deteriorate. But I think when I tuned in and kind of was activated was, you know, there was a lot of, when it was Hillary versus Trump, it was a lot of people saying like, oh, she has it in the bag. This guy will never win. And I felt that way as well. And to watch on TV live, the numbers just going up and up, and he won. And then for me to read that she won the popular vote, but he still took it. I think that's what made me be like, wait a second, how does that work? I started asking a lot of questions. And I think that's when I kind of tuned in. But also what you were saying, like, I think the facade of what the presidential seat had before has kind of melted away, and it's been this like every day is this Orwellian headline that we have to read about, and that obviously there's just no way to ignore that. I think I'm using my empathy now more actively than stepping away. I'm actually engaging in like, what can I do to steer this in a direction that will have my future, the planet's future, my loved ones, my future kids, like about all that now. And I think that's what kind of activated me.
I think, you know, what you share, I think a lot of people feel is that my voice doesn't matter, my vote doesn't matter, I have nothing to contribute. But I think that sometimes people forget that the people who we are and how we show up to the table is enough, you know, and we should remind ourselves that there's a lot of value in that. And I think that it's really interesting that we're having this conversation with two actors, because you all know how to tell stories, you know? And I think that the number one thing as organizers that we learn is there's so much power in the story of yourself and in the way that you yourself tell stories that we forget. And sometimes we're overwhelmed by politics in general and thinking, you know, it's just too much information for me. I can't access it. But I think it's a really great reminder to all of our viewers right now that showing up as yourself and telling your story actually does make a difference in the eyes of policymakers, in the eyes of people who are organizing on the ground. And honestly, just by making it more personal, like as you both have mentioned, honoring your families, it's a way to make it that personal to you yourself, and to make it a reason of why you should step up and be more vocal and vote. I wanted to ask about, and you know, we were just talking about this, but there is a lot of first-time voters probably watching this live stream right now, people looking for information or ways to get engaged. I wanted to ask both of you of a moment in your life where you thought of getting engaged or your first time voting and what that was like.
My parents they would always bring us to the polls when we were little. And obviously we couldn't vote when we were kids, but whether it was local elections or presidential election, we always went with them, and they put the little "I voted" sticker on us, because they raised us to really be proud to be American and to be proud that, you know, this is our country and we are that. We are American. And so I think just being able to observe my parents being a part of that process is what really inspired me. And I really want to thank everybody who's watching right now, especially if you're a first-time voter. I know that it's not too late right now in certain states to register, but just using this moment as an opportunity for anybody watching who wants more information, votolatino.org is really great if you're a first-time voter or somebody that just wants to check on their registration status or get anything situated so that we can all be at the polls or voting by mail. And I'm really excited to be able to just follow in my parents' footsteps and put that sticker and participate in the process and be proud of the country that we live in.
I kind of touched on it before with getting activated after the whole Hillary thing, but I kind of want to piggyback off of what you said, Natalie, before, where, and this has to do with first-time voters too. I think there's this almost pressure behind the word like activist, that it's this like legendary thing. You have to be out there protesting, and you have to be on the front lines of the battle. And I really feel like activism has so many different facets, and just voting, even if you really think about it, it's such a simple, small act that is being an activist. If you're getting involved, and you're right now, we have the internet is like at a click of a button, you can research everything that's on the ballot. You can look at all of these propositions, and it wasn't like that before. I feel like now we have everything at our fingertips. And first time voters, you guys are powerful, because you guys, I feel like a lot of people have adopted their parents' point of view, and it's always been this red versus blue thing. But I think Gen Z and my generation, like, we're waking up that it's not red and blue. Like, there's so much in between. I think we're a lot more inquisitive. We want to ask questions. We're awake to a lot of the things that are, part of this vote and this ballot. So I don't know. I just think that is kind of being an activist, is just participating in the vote. If that's all you do, that's amazing. But even just sharing a fact-checked article or doing you don't always have to be doing something like this panel right now. It could just be the smallest act, and that is activism.
Yeah,
I totally agree with a couple of points. The first is when you talked about being an activist, I remember someone asked me, like, when do you remember becoming politically engaged? And I was like, oh, when I voted.
yeah.
That was the first time that I was like, whoa, I'm part of this democracy. It's so, especially as we can all agree as first gen kids or kids from immigrant parents, it's such a powerful feeling to cast your first vote and to feel like you're part of this country, And so I agree with you, Andrew, when people talk about activism, it means voting as well. That simple act of voting is, you're creating change. But I do know that there are a lot of misconceptions about voting right now, and there's a lot of information, especially as a person from Texas, we're now experiencing voter suppression and misinformation. And when I started voting, y'all, we didn't have the internet. Like back then, I couldn't Google things. I didn't know who was voting. But I think something that our viewers should know right now is, if something doesn't sound right or looks fishy, inform yourself. You have so much information to your access. Go to votolatino.org. Go to iwillvote.com. There are so many tools and resources out there from verified organizations. So dive in on the internet. It's something that I wish I had when I was growing up, and I didn't have those resources. But I want to turn it over to y'all and see if you all have any questions for me.
Yeah, we had some stuff written down that we definitely want to talk about. And I think, there's a lot of people going around right now saying that things are going to be rigged, and there's just a lot of misinformation. People are really nervous about the mail-in ballots. What do you have to say to anybody watching right now who's really concerned or scared about all of that and how voting is going to happen differently in this election?
Yeah, there definitely is a lot of that going around. And I would say to our viewers at home that mail-in ballot is not a new phenomenon, right? It's not the first time that we have an election with mail-in ballots. We just now have more access to it. And I think that more access to people to make it as easy as possible for them to vote is progress for our country. The best thing about mail-in ballot is that states already have protocols and measure to ensure the safety of your ballot. And I just want to give an anecdote. In the 2016 cycle, I was working in Colorado actually for Hillary Clinton. And Colorado is one of the few states that has all mail-in ballots. And what happened as a result of that is that we had one of the largest voter turnouts in that state compared to other states in the country. So just goes to show you, the easier you make it for people to vote, the more that they're going to show up to vote. And if you live in a state that has voter mail by vote disposable to you, do it. The best thing about it is that you can do it while you're watching, you know, your Netflix, or you can do it in your pajamas or eating cereal, or, you know, whatever. You can Google people who are on the ballot at home. But the number one thing to do is fill it out and send it back in, and be assured that there are protocols already in place to ensure that your mail-in ballot is delivered safely and securely. Right now, the Trump administration is trying to undermine USPS, doing everything they can to try to suppress our vote. But it's one of the tactics that is being used by our opponents, right? Like, they want to misinform us. They want to throw curveballs at us. They want to get us tired. But we need to stay focused. And if you have access to mailing at home, voting at home, you should absolutely do it.
I think that's another thing you mentioned that's a really good point. Is I do feel like one of the tactics right now, we live in a time that we do have information overload. We are constantly getting news updates. We see posts on social media. Everything is a click of a button. And I think the opponent side, they know that we get overwhelmed, and it feels so exhausting to just consistently being bombarded with misinformation. And that's another reason why I think your vote counts, because don't fall for that tactic. We're smarter than that. Like, don't just feel like you have to step away because it's just everything seems messy. Like, if we win by a landslide, there will be no denying who the winner is for this election. And I think that's a huge part of it is it needs to be undeniable. So if that means you have to go in person, wear a mask, plan ahead. If you need to drop it off in person so you know that it got into the box, and do that early, whatever you have to do. But just the only wrong choice is not voting. That's the only way that I feel like you're making a misstep.
Yeah. And what about people who aren't citizens or people who aren't old enough? Natalie, what do you suggest are ways that they can also still be involved in the process?
That's a great question. And I have a lot of, another organization that I really love is United We Dream. And they started something called the Squad, where a ton of immigrant youth, documented and undocumented, have been gathering to do what they can to make a difference in this election, which is texting, phone banking, encouraging their relatives and people that they know to go out to vote, sending out information about voting deadlines. But something that I also think is important is to note is that there's a place for everybody in this election. You don't have to necessarily be doing the conventional things like texting or calling. You should show up as you are. And I think that the best way to start that is by figuring out what you're really passionate about. So if that's an issue, if that's environmental change, there's organizations like Sunrise Movement, you know, or if you're looking for really bold and progressive candidates, guess what? You can volunteer for them from your house. You know, the beauty of our situation right now is that we don't have to live in the same state as the candidates that are running. And there are bold progressive candidates running up and down the ballot across the country. And so I would say to everyone watching right now who's either ineligible to vote or not old enough is you can still be part of this election as you are. Find out what makes you super passionate. If it's a candidate, if it's an issue, figure out the way that you want to contribute. So if you have the privilege of throwing a $5 to a campaign, or if you have time and you want to text or make calls, then do that. But there's, I think the main point is there's definitely a place for you.
I also think it's worth noting that, you know, you might not be old enough now, but everything that happens in the 4 years or 8 years of a presidency does affect your lifetime. And I think that's another like kind of thing that we don't realize, that even if you're not the age to vote per se, it will affect your future, whether you like it or not. So I think that recently I even had a really difficult conversation with a family member that was against my political views. And I think the youth have a really strong point of view, and it's worth having difficult conversations. If it's something you know is going to affect your future, try actually sitting with somebody and just saying, like, I think when there's a face to the name where it's somebody they know that is going to be affected, their future is going to be affected, and genuinely just ask them the questions about specific things that will affect your lifetime, whether you're voting or not. I think you still matter as somebody who lives. It's not even just about the United States anymore. I mean, this is going to affect the entire planet and the entire world. We're on a global stage. So I think it's still important for people who aren't old enough to vote to get involved in different ways like that.
Yeah, I really think that it doesn't even really matter if you're an actor or a musician or an influencer or a lifelong activist. We all have a platform. It doesn't matter if you have 5 followers, 5 million followers, because it's also not just having a platform on social media. It's just having a platform in life. We all have communities that we belong to, families that we belong to, friend groups that we can connect with. And it's important for all of us, no matter what, no matter who you are, to care, because it affects everybody directly in ways that we might not even anticipate sometimes. So I love what you said, that this really is for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, if you're undocumented or not. There's a way for us all to be united in this and to really put in the care and compassion and empathy that you talked about previously, and make sure we elect leaders who value those things and who are going to make policy that really reflects those values.
I completely agree. And I like what you said, Andrew, about sitting down and having a conversation with a person. And I think it goes back to what we were talking about, telling your story. You know, I think the more personal that you make it for people about why you care about voting and about, you know, why that would make a difference to you, the more impact you have. And Carmela, what you said about our networks, you know, people like to get fancy these days in the world of campaigns, and they came up with a term called relational organizing, which literally just means what you said. You know, it just means you have a network of people, reach out to them. You know, you should write a list down, and you know, going back to like making a plan to vote. If you're able to vote by mail, vote by mail. If you're able to show up and vote early, vote early. But if you have to show up on election day, make sure that you have a plan to vote. Make sure that you know where your polling location is. And then also reach out to your aunts and uncles and cousins and friends and everyone and tell them, hey, this is where we all vote. Let's all go together.
Grab a voting buddy, whether it's virtual or whatever. It's fun to link up with friends and say, hey, do you want to be my voting buddy? Let's make a group. Let's really learn what's on the ballot and make a plan and think about how we're going to do this, because it's just clearly, it's so important. And we're lucky that this is a democratic process we're all able to participate in.
I completely agree. One of the other things that Andrew touched on was something that I think you said you experienced also, was voter apathy, of thinking, you know, politics is not for me. My vote's not going to make a difference. What would you all say to those people?
I think we kind of touched on it before about just like, it's always, a lot of times it's a very close race and everyone can. That's the part that really blows my mind, is how close it can be. And if everyone just, it's such a small act. Like nowadays, everything can get mailed to you. You can just go next door. There's so many, it's so accessible that I feel like it's such a tiny act that you can do that has such a massive impact. And the other side wants you to feel like you don't count. That's their entire strategy. If you think about it, it all boils down to they're going to win, your vote doesn't count. So just fight against that. And really, I don't know. To me, if you really look at it from a bird's eye view, it's such a small act that makes such a big difference. And if everyone comes together, that's where the real power is.
Yeah, I really think, of course, every vote matters and every vote counts. But if you need another reason, do it as an act of honor. Honor our veterans who have fought for us. Honor our ancestors who brought us here from countries where this is not the way leaders are chosen. Do it as an act to honor the people who physically can't go vote. And I just really think having that as the crux of your vote, and having the respect and honoring of people who don't have this ability in other countries, I think do it for them if you need another reason. And if that's at the heart of it, then it matters 100 million times more.
I could not agree more. I think that voting right now, if you're able to vote, is an act of solidarity to our most marginalized communities who have been so affected under this administration. So keeping them in mind, keeping, workers who are in the front lines right now who don't have health care, for people who still aren't getting paid the minimum wage that they deserve, for asylum seekers who are still in Mexico because of Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, and for all the families who have been separated. I think that it's an act of solidarity right now, and to preserve our democracy as well. I think it's such a pivotal moment in our country's history right now, where we get to decide if we preserve our democracy. And as Andrew said, people are going to make you feel small, and they're going to make you feel like your voice doesn't matter and that you don't count. But that's because they're afraid that we're going to make a change. And, we are 32 million voters. Latinos are 32 million voters. 1 million of them turn 18 every single year. There's so much power in our vote. So I think we should really make a plan to vote. Vote early if you can. Vote by mail if you can. And if not, make a plan to vote. Go to votolatino.org to find all the information that you need, or iwillvote.com as well. And I think we're just a few minutes shy of wrapping up. I wanted to turn it over to you all for any closing thoughts.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us, because this was really nice to just connect with different people from different points of views, but all sharing a common ground. I just want everyone to really take like 5 minutes to just picture, when you wake up on November 4th or whatever day they announce the decision, what world you truly want to live in. I think I've experienced, different events in my lifetime, 9/11, coronavirus, Trump winning. Those are things that when I woke up the next day, it was a completely new reality. There was an old world and a new world. And this election will be one of those monumental shifts in life where you will wake up in a new reality. And I think just really try to meditate and think about that version of the world. And it depends on who wins and which one you want to be part of. And don't let the results be announced and you wish that you could have been involved more. I think that's really important, that you can't go back in time once this is announced. So just think about it that way.
Yeah, I think that was so spot on, Andrew, and I'm right there with you. I think that I want to thank everybody who even came to this conversation, because that means you care. And we need more of you in this country. We need more of you in this world. We need people who are going to have those hard conversations, maybe read a book that they don't necessarily want to read, and expand our minds, and to be able to really learn about how important all of this is. And it's a huge step that you even came here today to have a conversation and be involved in this live. So for anybody watching right now, thank you so much. And thank you for having us, Natalie. Thank you so much to Voto Latino for all that you do. And again, anybody who wants to see specifics with their state, because every state is different, again, go to votolatino.org and check out what's going on with your state as far as voting goes, and if it's too late to register or if you still can, if you can vote early, if you can request a mail-in ballot. And I just want to say thank you to so much that everybody who cares for our country and everybody who cares for our democracy. And you're amazing, Natalie. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. No, thank you so much for using your platforms, both of you, for good. Thank you so much for caring. It was an honor to be with you all. I can't even think of how many times I said I agree during our conversation. But thank you both so much, and I look forward to continuing to be in this fight with you both.
All right, thank you so much. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Natalie. We'll talk soon. Bye, everybody.